not a YouTuber, just like making videos. And this is kind of a response to Enigma Hood. You know, I'm subscribed to this guy's channel, Enigma Hood, and he's a good guy or whatever. I like his stuff, you know what I'm saying? Very intelligent individual. But he has a series called Greatest Misconceptions, where, you know, people may conceive certain things as they feel that is facts, but it's really kind of false. So therefore he does a lot of, he clarifies things up, like what is the camel's hump used for, and so forth. Like, for instance, he has one where it's Greatest Misconceptions, black people are stupid, which I'm like, I didn't know that so many people thought blacks were stupid, to the point is he has to make a video, a misconceptions video on it and so forth, to try to prove, I guess, come up with a dissertation that blacks aren't stupid, that people are just, this is just a misconception and so forth. So yeah, I found that interesting. But hence, Enigma Hood is not a black person. And usually when non-black people want to speak on behalf of the so-called black people, the black commonwealth, yeah, then things can get a little bit say misconstrued and so forth. That ultimately I felt his heart was in the right place, but some of his video, in my opinion, was almost borderline offensive. You know what I'm saying? And it is an excellent example why non-black people should not speak on our behalf, you know, and so forth. Now, let's dig in. He goes into this this African pygmy by the name of Ota Benga, which I thought was interesting because I didn't even know this story. So I went and did my own research on this story myself. This African pygmy that was put into the Bronx Zoo in a monkey house exhibit and so forth. Matter of fact, there's a book written on it, on the subject matter and so forth. Matter of fact, I just ordered the book off Amazon.com, so I may give you a more detailed analysis on this Ota Benga character. But supposedly, you know, a white man by the name of Philip Werner captured this, not captured, but got a hold of this African pygmy that was enslaved or whatever, and tossed him in a museum or whatever. And some people say that Werner was using this pygmy and so forth to prove racial superiority. You know, how superior the white man is to the black man and so forth, and put him on exhibit on a zoo, in a fair, in the St. Louis Fair. Ota Benga was basically paraded around like, oh, look at this black savage and so forth, and this and that. But hence, back in those days, the early 1900s, there was putting other races of people on display was kind of like a common thing. Like, hence, grabbing a hold of an Eskimo or somebody from Tibet or whatever, and talk about the evolutionary biology of human beings. You know, because they felt that white people felt that other races was lower on the evolutionary scale, hence the African pygmy and so forth. But the thing is like this, as I've stated in one of my earlier dissertations, the response to Fuck My Ancestors, I talked about the different skeletal structures, and technically African pygmies are a different race, if you believe in the concept of race or genotypes, than black people. Hence, as I've stated, African pygmies are capoids. We're Congoids. Capoids, Congoids, capoids, Congoids. Hence, we're different from each other, almost the same way as Caucasians are different than Congoids. You know what I'm saying? On a biological makeup and so forth. So hence, But I can understand people ain't they're gonna look at the African pygmies, they're black, you know, their skin is black or whatever, their nose shape and this and that, and they're gonna put them and say that they're just you know, relatives of black people. But African pygmies are just as about as relatives to black people as they are relatives to white people and so forth. As I said before, they have a whole completely different skeletal structure, makeup and so forth. But supposedly this guy Ota Benga was in this Jew, and white people was trying to prove their superiority over black people by having this pygmy inside a zoo holding a monkey, playing around with the monkeys and so forth, and just being a freaking savage and this and that. And now I can understand why Philip Werner would want to put this African pygmy on display, and you know, to try to prove white people's superiority, especially during the early 1900s. Of course, this was after slavery, when black people was making strides in the academic fields and scientific fields and so forth. So hence, whites will want to see, you know what I'm saying, that blacks aren't as smart as they are and so forth, and just wanted and remind themselves that, hey, these guys are nothing more than primitive savages. You know, I can understand that. But the story with Ota Benga is that due to public pressure, he was freed from the zoo or whatever, and then he there was some reverend or whatever, so, you know what I'm saying, and he got a hold of him and taught him or tutored him or had him take classes to learn English and so forth. And Ota Benga ended up being just a member of our society, wore Western clothes and worked at a tobacco factory or some shit like that. But he wanted to go back to his home in the Congo. And when World War I broke out, you know, going back home would be deemed impossible, you know, for him at that time. And Ota Benga committed suicide. Hence, when Ota Benga was just a savage animal or whatever, when they had him in a Bronx Zoo inside the monkey house, they attempted to civilize him, so-called civilize him. And then once he started working a job, you know what I'm saying, wearing westernized clothes, you know, he ended up killing himself. You know what I mean? So that speaks highly about our civilization and so forth. I'm like, he wanted to go back home to the Congo. I'm like, wow. I was like, why would somebody from Africa, because we deemed Africa as such this horrible place, will actually want to leave America and go back to Africa? So that's interesting. But hence, in Enigma Hood's dissertation or whatever, he used that as an example of, but you know, it was really kind of, I don't know, redundant, because then he went on to talk about how, why aren't there so many black people in high academia, or they're living in poor, impoverished areas and so forth. Now, he did go on to say that black people were captured from Africa and so forth, and we had to learn a culture, which, yeah, that's true. I'm like, whether you feel where black people came from and so forth, we had to learn we had to learn a new language and so forth, and had to adapt to a different culture and this and that, and we was kept out of the maelstrom, so forth. When it comes to schooling, like everything black people had done was inferior, you know what I'm saying, going to inferior schools, living in inferior neighborhoods and so forth. But about that, you know what I'm saying, blacks still we're still climbing up that ladder. You know what I'm saying? We still made major accomplishments when it comes to inventions and innovations and so forth. And I also like to point out that one thing Enigma Hood said, he's talked about now the most offensive part to his presentation was like he was saying that you know, blacks, maybe he wasn't generalizing, maybe he wasn't saying all blacks, I don't know, but blacks come from an environment that rewards being tough or whatever, and having, you know, intellect and you know what I'm saying, being scholarly was non-existent, you know, because shows a picture of this gang and all this other stuff. See, this is the part that I have a problem with, because the thing is with us so-called blacks is that we are being represented by our minority, by our criminal degenerates, you know, that are these people are a minority amongst us. You know what I'm saying, that represent our 10 or 15% and so forth. Even though when taking into account our population wise, our percentile, yeah, it is higher. I admit, due to our population, you know what I'm saying, our criminals, our poverty line is very high compared to white people in contrast to their population and so forth. Yes, I get it, but still, figuring our trials and tribulations here in America and so forth, that I'd like to see more focus on the black people that come from the middle class, that don't get any problems, don't get any troubles and so forth. More of an emphasis on black people like me, you know what I'm saying, who had the same, who grew up, you know what I'm saying, in the same environment that I grew up in and so forth. But still, hence, just because a black person is from the ghetto and from these decadent neighborhoods and so forth, doesn't mean he's a criminal, or doesn't mean he's going to be a criminal. Hence, so Enigma Hood showed a picture of Judge Joe Mathis. We all know his story, you know, he's from Detroit, you know, he's from the ghetto. I think he used to be a gangbanger and so forth, and then he made it to be a judge. Hence, with blacks, we see this rags to riches story, which there's nothing wrong with that. This is America. That's the American dream. But, you know, what about the story of the kid who was born on the wrong side of the tracks, who get in trouble, and let's say he becomes a plumber or a construction worker, or, you know what I mean, or an electrician or a maintenance man and so forth. See what I mean? Not just this, I used to be a gangbanger, come from poverty, and now I'm rich and wealthy. How about I used to be a gangbanger, come from poverty or whatever, and now I just have me I'm a plumber, you know what I mean? I live a regular square life, you know what I'm saying? I live in middle America and so forth. So yeah. So yeah, I don't want to say I was horribly offensive by a presentation. I felt that he left a whole lot of things out, and it just his whole video just seemed awkward. You know, to start with Oda Benga and then to go into the whole gang banging thing and being tough and the hood and the ghetto, which, you know what I'm saying, that's a very loose connection right there, because hence your environment you come from. I understand what he's saying. He's talking about, you know, being products of your environment, but still, with what blacks have been through and so forth, and also we have to analyze that there is black people are moving into the suburbs in record numbers. I know that's positive. I said this in an earlier, and I know that people don't like to hear that kind of positive sort of information. You know, blacks moving into the suburbs are moving into the middle class at a higher rate than before. Yeah, but, you know, but thanks for watching and sally forth.